So perfect. Let's get started here. And to start out with, queremos empezar with simply that awareness, Hispanic Heritage Month. What is that? I think we live, day to day so fast, and we have a moment to celebrate, but sometimes we forget where it started from, right? Why we have a moment for this month. And so we wanted to kind of start up with this, that National Hispanic Heritage Month is recognized from September 15th to October 15th, but entre nosotros, we can celebrate it every single day for 365 every year, ¿verdad? And by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America. I think we wanted to start out with this because I think with Marin Latino Leaders, you'll hear a little more about our statement of purpose, but that's what we're here for. That's why we have these luncheons, to have the continuous celebration of our stories, of the leaders who live in Marin County, who are supporting not only our communities, our students, our familias, but also each other to create change, positive change. And so this is something we wanted to start out with by sharing that. Other pieces that are very interested and very amazing for us to kind of share is that the day of September 15th is significant because it is the anniversary of independence for Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Day, September 16th, September 18th, respectively. So for all of our Hispanos who we just kind of highlighted, shout out to you all, to your familias, because, growing up, from the migration mentality, there's a lot that we overcome. So definitely a shout out to you for continuing every day. But also one thing that we do want to highlight is that Indigenous Peoples Day, also Dia de la Raza, is on October 12th. So that 30-day period includes all of those components. So again, for those who are just joining, bienvenidos. Feel free to share where you're coming from. I see my sister just joined us from the city of San Rafael. Hi, Lydia. Nice to see you. And we want to highlight this artist, Adriana M. Garcia, murals. I think the most beautiful thing about our community is highlighting our community, ¿verdad? And so, like I mentioned, Cecilia has the Migration is Beautiful poster in the background, but it's something that we want to celebrate ongoing, ¿verdad? Who's coming from our community and represent. So con eso dicho, I'm gonna take a pause and pass it over to my team here.
All right, hi everyone. And again, thank you for coming today and for definitely celebrating with us the Hispanic National Month. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to go ahead and just read our statement of purpose, and then I'll pass it over to Monica. So first of all, Marin Latino Leaders was created to support and elevate the Latino voice in Marin County by recognizing leadership through networking opportunities that empowers the sharing of the challenges and successes. It is a platform to raise one voice for political, social, educational, and economic change for the enhancement of the Latino community. Marin Latino Leaders is committed to make this a successful entity by featuring speakers that have succeeded in their careers and or have contributed to the community. Thank you. Now I'm just gonna let Monica take it away.
Yeah, I think Yolanda wanted to say some words as well. So Yolanda, do you want to go ahead before I start? Unmute yourself. Please.
I think she might be having some trouble.
Are you able to mute her, Saga?
I cannot unmute.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, there we go.
All right, thank you. Buenas tardes and welcome to Marin Latino Leaders Luncheon meeting. My name is Yolanda Gibson, founder and chair of the Marin Latino Leaders. Before we begin our program, we would like to welcome our recent board member, Brenda Camarena. Brenda has been an active Latino leader for many years in Marin County. She is currently part of Programa Cuerpo Corazón Comunidad, and also is part of the Multicultural Center. Welcome to our team, Brenda, and thank you for your participation. We're also saying hasta luego to our treasured board members, Saga Apostol and Hugo K. They have been an integral part of the success of Marin Latino Leaders. We wish them well and may they continue to represent our young Latino leaders as they go forward. Today, we are celebrating the first day of Hispanic Heritage Month, and we are honoring Dr. Itoco Garcia, Superintendent of the Sausalito-Marin City School District. We will hear more about him at the presentation. Also, I would just like to acknowledge Monica Cañas for the super job that she has done, for this luncheon. With that, I guess Saga already did our statement of purpose. And so I just thank you for being here and we appreciate your continuing support. Monica.
Thanks, Yolanda. So my name is Monica Cañas, and I am the Public Relations Officer for the Marin Latino Leaders. And so I'm going to start by acknowledging some of the elected officials and special guests that we have here today. Jim Hugeboom, Superintendent of San Rafael City Schools. Kay Collin, Mayor of the City of San Rafael. Lisa Santora, Deputy Public Health Officer of the Marin Health and Human Services. Lisa Bennett, Trustee of the Sausalito-Marin City Schools. Lori Fragoli, District Attorney at the Marin County DA's Office. Lucia Martel Dow, Trustee of San Rafael City Schools. Sean Tippett, Field Representative for the Office of Assembly Member Mark Levine. And Stephanie Hellman, Vice Mayor of the Town of Fairfax. Thank you for your service and thank you for being with us today. And now I have the pleasure of introducing to you our very special guest today, Dr. Itoko Garcia. He is Superintendent of Sausalito-Marin City Schools, and he is also Co-Executive Director of Hip Hop Scholastics. Dr. Garcia has been a transformative professional educator for 22 years in some of the most challenged schools in the Bay Area, and has dedicated his life and career to achieving educational equity for all students traditionally failed by our public school system. He spent 12 years as a teacher and instructional coach and 6 years as a middle school and elementary school administrator in Oakland and Hayward. He spent 2 years as an educational consultant working across 8 school districts in California and Nevada, focused on developing equity mindsets and heart sets among school and district administrators. Dr. G is in his 3rd year as the Sausalito-Marin City School District Superintendent. He is a member of the National Turnaround Arts Equity Committee, the Principal Leadership Institute Equity Advisory Committee, the Alameda County Arts Integrated Principal Leadership Network, Cal State Teach Advisory Board, and the Marin County Children and Families Commission. He is a graduate of Marin County Public Schools and earned his undergraduate and doctorate degrees from UC Berkeley and master's from Fresno State. So with that, I just want to thank you, Dr. Garcia, for taking the time to be with us today. And you may go ahead and begin your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. It's really an honor to be here today. And I just want to thank all of the attendees from current superintendent of San Rafael City Schools and my senior year econ and government teacher, Jim Hogeboom at Tam High, to Jim Correa, probably one of the only other Colombian kids that grew up in Marin County in my era. Jim and I used to work together as bank tellers at the Bank of America main office there on 4th Street way back in the day before we both decided to do what we do now. And my mama is here, and so many other colleagues, amazing first 5 family, thanks for being here, and Lori and Lisa, people that I work really closely with from the County of Marin. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you all for coming today. And so I've been asked to focus on a few things, and I'm going to start on leadership. And this is a theme that I've been speaking a lot and thinking a lot about in the recent days. And I think that for me, leadership is a service commitment. I never became a teacher because I wanted to, be rich or be well known. I became a teacher because I wanted to serve the community. And my ability to become a teacher is really rooted in this place, in this space, in this county, and in my family. I come from a family of public servants. My mom is a retired nurse. My father's a retired doctor. My grandfather worked for the Social Security Administration. My aunt was a teacher. My cousin's a teacher. I kind of had this baked into me. And even though I resisted becoming an educator for quite some time, eventually I found my calling. And a lot of those experiences that I had growing up as one of the only Latino kids in Mill Valley Public Schools in the 80s really shaped this journey. Also, a big shout out to Diana Lopez. Thank you, Diana, for being here. Just an amazing community partner and colleague and other Latina leader. You guys should totally feature Diana one day, just, for the record. I had a lot of experiences in schools, in Mill Valley Public Schools, really being kind of othered. Being one of the only Latino kids, and thank you for also shouting out Indigenous Peoples Day in conjunction with Hispanic Heritage Month. It's very, our identities are mixed race identities, and the word Hispanic is a conflicting word. I know that we have to use that because that's the name of the federally recognized month, right? But my father gave me an Indigenous name quite purposefully. And he gave me the name Itoko because he wanted me to always remember my roots and my history. The Indigenous part of that history, but also the Colombiano part of our history. And you can imagine not only being one of the only Latino kids, right, but having the name Itoko was a challenge growing up in the 80s, right? I mean, when people try to make funny versions of my name now, I just kind of look at them and I'm like, wow, you think that's original, huh? I probably heard every version or every joke in Spanish and English that you could possibly think of by, the age of 9 or 10. And, one of the things too, from the opening slide that really resonated with me is, es nuestro Día de Independencia en muchos países and tomorrow for Mexico. But, one common thread that I think ties together many of us that come from the diaspora is all of those countries on the initial slide. They were liberated by one person, really, Simón Bolívar. El Gran Libertador, right? He came through outside of Mexico, and 1,000 respects to Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata. Outside of Mexico, Simón Bolívar liberated basically the rest of Latin America. And one of the experiences I had in school, I remember clearly being at Mill Valley Middle School and being in the 6th grade. And we were, it's world history, right? So we were looking at Latin American history, and we were doing a round robin read aloud. And one of the things that my father was very also adamant about was teaching me revolutionary history, Latin American revolutionary history in particular. These were the bedtime stories I got from my dad. And so I knew very well the history of Zapata and Villa and Bolivar. And it came to be my turn to do this read aloud. And I got to the names Villa, Zapata, and Bolivar, and I pronounced them the way that we pronounce them in Spanish. And my whole class fell out laughing. And my teacher thought that I was trying to, disrupt her class or be funny or be a class clown. But I generally couldn't fix my mouth to say Pancho Villa or Emiliano Zapata or Simon Bolivar. Those are not the ways that I have been taught to say these historical figures. So she made me reread the passage, and I read it, and I said, Simon Bolivar, and she stopped me. And she said, read it again. And I said, Emiliano, and she stopped me. She kicked me out of class for that. And so I was pretty confused, right? I mean, like, I wasn't really trying to disrupt her class or be a class clown, and just was trying to authentically, read the art history. And I ended up in the principal's office right after that. And, I got assigned some detention for correctly pronouncing the names of our liberators. And I don't think they called my mom on that one, because I'm pretty sure she would have come down and read them the riot act if they had, because she definitely did that at other spaces throughout my educational journey in this county when folks tried to suspend or expel me. But I think that one flew under the radar. And those kinds of experiences really is what galvanized me to become an educator. I thought to myself, there's got to be a different way to do this. I don't know how, I don't know what it is, but I think that I can be an educator that that validates, that affirms, that lifts up kids and their experience, that doesn't kick kids out of class for correctly pronouncing names. And so, off I went, and I was able to do that with a lot of gifts, like I said, that I received from my family and that I received here in Southern Marin, in San Rafael, in the Canal, here in Marin City. I was gifted a lot of cultural and linguistic competencies that allowed me to go be a very successful educator in the barrio, in Oakland, in East Oakland, and in Hayward, in North Hayward and Cherryland. And I think the thing for me is that, leadership is about service. It's about commitment to our community. And it's about a commitment to making sure that two things happen. One, that we are always working in service in my business, in service of children first and families second, and then making sure that we are working with our community and our community partners to give voice, to help the community advocate for itself and to identify what it needs, and then working collaboratively, together to deliver on those needs. And I'm very clear on that. Es por el bienestar, right? It's for well-being. That is what we should all be leading for at all times. That should be the lens. Like I said, I never got into this for a recognition. I never got into this for money. And I had the great blessing and opportunity, even though I had some negative experiences in Marin County Public Schools, I'm also very fond of saying I got a private school education in a public school setting. And I did. As a freshman at UC Berkeley, I was better prepared than people that had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a high school education. I was sitting in classes with people that went to Phillips and Andover and Exeter and Taft School for Boys, and they were not as well prepared as I was with my Tam High Public School, Mill Valley Public School education. And so I got an opportunity to rise, and I realized very quickly that I spent about 10 years as a classroom teacher, and I loved teaching kindergarten. It was really one of my favorite jobs ever. And I would go back to it in a heartbeat. But the thing that I realized was I wasn't having a wide enough impact. In the early thousands, I was looking around and thinking, wow, okay, I'm transforming, 20 odd lives a year, but look what's happening in our world. I think I need to have a larger impact. And that's kind of what set me on a path to school leadership. And I was able to be, to do some things, take some tests, continue on with my education, and have the opportunity to become a principal. And my first principalship was at Cherryland Elementary School in Hayward. And Cherryland es el mero barrio, 80% Latino, 65% Spanish speaking. And that might not sound like a very diverse community, but 23 different language groups spoken there as well. It's an anchor community. It's an immigrant community. And not dissimilar to the canal, and particularly the canal when I was growing up. I remember a canal that was full of Mexicanos and Salvadoreños and Haitians and Vietnamese people from all over the world. And I think there's still that element there, but I think, over time, as waves of immigrations come in, demographics change, right? And what I really learned at Cherryland also was that a main focus of leadership really is making sure that not only the people that we serve are doing well, but the people inside of our organization are doing well. And that's something that I'm not sure that I always understood prior to that experience, right? That our job as leaders isn't just to serve our community, it's also to serve the people that work in our organizations, and in particular to lift them up. If they're amazing people, to make sure that they shine. And I'm really proud to say that different people in our organization are really starting to shine. Our community school director, Jamir Reynolds, just won an Echoing Green Fellowship. And, that's something that Van Jones and Michelle Obama won. And he won that fellowship for his work and our work on starting the Marin County Cooperations Team, which is which is now a nonprofit. We realized rather quickly that to maximize funding, it was better for it to be its own 501c3 and not be a school district operation per se. But it brings together 57 different community partners in service of everyone that's enrolled in our school district, regardless of where they live. So, 41% of our out of district transfers come from San Rafael. We have kids from Novato. We have kids from Stinson. We have kids from Mill Valley. We have kids from all over. And so that's why what originally was the Marin City Cooperation Team became the Marin County Cooperation Team. And it's really my goal as a leader that the excellency in our organization continues to rise, and that our staff continues to have opportunities to grow and to create and to shine. And I think those are my two kind of core leadership philosophies, that of service and that of really supporting and cultivating and building capacity in our organizations so that other folks shine and other folks become leaders. I have a meme that I like to present, which says, "You are not a leader until you've created a leader that creates another leader." And I really believe that, right? Our role as leadership isn't just to lead and then walk away. And so I think the third thing I would like to add in terms of, conceiving of leadership, and, there's so much work in this field. I'll say two things. One from the work of Brene Brown, and that work I've been exposed to in different spaces, but most recently in the countywide superintendents meeting, which Jim is a leader of, and we had someone come in last year and work with us on Brene Brown's work. But it's important to be vulnerable as a leader. It's important that people understand that, you know, that you're a human being, and that you have emotions, and that you experience emotions like a human being, and that you'll be able to support other people in experiencing those emotions, right? And part of that vulnerability is knowing that we don't have the answers, right? But really being able to set up and create teams of people and bring people together in teams so that there is a collective expertise that's applied to a problem. Often we think of leadership as an individualistic practice, and I'm here to just advocate for the idea that it is anything but. Leadership is and should always be an act of collectivism, and that is something that I think culturally and linguistically, we as Latino, as Hispanic, Latino, Latine, Latinx, you know, the term just changes so often. People, that's something that we bring to the table culturally and linguistically. We do intend to be a more collective people. And yes, part of leadership is accepting responsibility, right? Everything's our fault. Everything will always be our fault. We're responsible for everything. That's part of the territory. But as a leadership style, I think it's really important to lead collectively. And then the other piece of kind of research that I'd like to bring into the conversation is there's an article on social justice leadership, Theo Harris, 2009. And it's a really fascinating article for those of you that are really interested in leadership. I'd highly recommend that you read it. But they did case studies of principals and of superintendents from around the country that had been viewed as successful leaders for social justice. And it's one of those like academic articles that at first you're like, why am I reading this? Like it's totally inconclusive. What they found was that almost none of these leaders had anything in common. And they go on to say part of that is because of context, right? Leadership in Marin is different than leadership in Oakland, is different than leadership in Hayward, is different than leadership in, you know, in New Haven, Connecticut, or in New York City, or in Miami, Florida, or in Chicago, or in San Antonio, Texas, right? These barrios have their own context, and leadership is very often specific to the context in which we work. And so it's important to remember that context. But the one thing that they found was that these leaders for social justice had in common. And it sounds a little dramatic, but this is how they wrote it. So it's how I'm going to present it. But the one thing that everything they found, everyone had in common was the willingness to have their head cut off. And what that means is they weren't leading to stay in their job. They were really leading to create the best outcomes for the communities that they served. Sometimes at their own professional not in their own professional best interest, right? Or not for their job security, or not for their house payment, or not for the security of their family. And that's an idea that I hold very near and dear. I am often somebody who will say things that other people don't want to say, or do things that other people don't want to do. But I always say and do those things because I believe they're the right thing to do, regardless of what that personal cost to me might be. And that is an ethic that I learned from my family. And that is an ethic that I learned also really growing up here in Marin, being one of the only Latino kids, being one of the only people sometimes to say, hey, wait a minute, I got to speak up on this thing. This moment right here is not right. Or, you know, we should think about this differently. Or, hey, maybe you haven't considered this thing over here. And, you know, sometimes it makes for funny social relationships. But, you know, again, you know, that isn't why I'm here. I am here to lead for justice. I'm here to lead for equity. I'm here to lead for the community. And sometimes that means everybody's not going to like what you're doing or what you're saying. And I think every other leader on this call can agree. You can never please 100% of the people 100% of the time. And as a matter of fact, you will be an ineffective leader if that's what you're trying to do. It's not possible. And so I think part of leadership that's critically important is making peace with that and knowing and understanding that and being comfortable in that space. I'm not here for everyone to like me. I'm here to create positive change in the community. I'm here to create positive change in the organization. And I think that, you know, I've been incredibly blessed to have the opportunity that I've had over the past 2 years and that I have before me. You know, I am fond of saying to people when they ask, well, you know, what is it about the Sausalito-Marin City School District that, you know, keeps you there? And what I tell people every time is, to me, it's the most unique opportunity in education. Like, really, truly, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. There's not another school community that is this diverse, that serves a multilingual, multicultural, multiracial community, that is still a low-income community, that is a historically Black community, with the amount of resources that we have. It is like the most unique opportunity in public education. And we have so many incredible community partners, whether it's Diana and the Marin City Free Library, or Lisa and the Public Health Department, or Lori and the DA's Department and Otis, or Marlon and the Probation Department, or Health and Human Services, or Felicia at Performing Stars, or Betty at the Hannah Project, or you know, there's dozens. There's too many people for me to shout out in this community, but it's an incredible community and it's an incredible opportunity. And really the only reason that we've been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. And, you know, I would be remiss in shouting out the Community Services District leadership, Royce and Terry and Damian Morgan, who I also went to high school with, and Paul Austin at Play Marin, who I also went to high school with, and the current Sausalito City Council. You know, there's been a seismic shift in this community, and a really unprecedented collaboration around and beyond that. Stevie Lee at Horizon Community School, another really important community partner. My old Pop Warner coach, Stevie. And what he likes to say often is, hey, I'm way more interested in partnership than I am in collaboration. Right. And I'm more interested in partnership than I am in collaboration, because a collaboration ends when it's no longer useful. A partnership is a partnership, and a partnership continues. And I think that's another really important thing to think about as we do this work, this critical work of community service and improving our communities. And, you know, as many of you know, we were handed the first desegregation order in 50 years in the state of California. And 5 weeks onto this job, I mean, I knew it was coming. I had no idea when. 5 weeks onto this job, I had scheduled a breakfast with my mom, and I was sitting there at Shoreline Coffee Shop. And for those of you that don't know, that's one of the oldest Mexicano-owned businesses in the county. El señor que era dueño de este coffee shop, I'll recall his name here in just a second, but you know, it was always a Mexican-American coffee shop, like my entire life, and it still is, even though he passed away. But we were sitting there at Shoreline Coffee Shop, and I said, hey, Mom, I'm gonna have to cut this short, watch the TV later. And, you know, my 5th week on the job, I was standing next to Attorney General Javier Becerra announcing this thing, and away we went. And I quickly realized that what I thought was going to be the job of superintendent was going to be really, really different than what, you know, I had anticipated. And that this settlement agreement was something that was critical for our success as a district, as a community, and you know, for myself as a new superintendent as well. And so, you know, there's a documentary which we will air here probably in November. And one of the things that we are currently partnering with the Sausalito City Council and Mayor Joel Hoffman on is a series of healing-centered community engagements. If for those of you that are not familiar with that work around healing-centered community engagement, that is the work of Sean Ginwright, Dr. Sean Ginwright, and he has a book by the same title that I would highly recommend about healing, hope and healing in urban education. And the November event will be us for the first time ever airing a BBC documentary that was shot in the 60s on the original desegregation effort. I had a chance to watch it, and we've gotten permission from the BBC to air it, even though it's never been aired in this country. And I had a chance to watch it pretty early in my superintendency, and I cried. I sat here in what was then my office at this table that I'm currently sitting at, and I cried. And I cried because we were having the same conversation in 2019 that was being had in the 60s. And some of the same people that were young in that documentary are still here in this community fighting the same fight. And at first I thought, man, who am I to think that I would be able to come here and do anything differently than what anyone else has ever done? It was daunting, but I kept watching. And I learned two really important things, other than what I just said, which is not much had changed between 2019 and 1965. The first important thing I learned was that desegregation plan was created by a group of experts, and I don't mean to air quote it. I'm sure they were experts in desegregation at the time, but experts from outside of this community. And you know, as was typical with the 60s, and I think is typical in America, we've made a little progress here, but you can imagine who those 5 experts were. They were 5 white men, and they sat in a cigarette smoke-filled back room and created this plan, and then came out and said, okay, community, here's what you're going to do. So, you know, point 1 was don't get a bunch of experts from outside the community and create a plan not with the community. I said, I think I can do that part differently. As a matter of fact, I know I can. I have the experience and I have the skill set to bring people together. I know how to do that. I understand community engagement. I also know how to build teams effectively. So I'm going to build teams of people to create this plan. It's not going to be 5 people. It's going to be a community generated plan. And yes, there was resistance and there was skepticism and there was questions. And as so often happens, when people can't attack a product, they attack a process. And people attacked that process. But by the time they decided to attack that process, it was too late. We had 6 people from across the community working together in teams. Sometimes people that hadn't been able to sit at a table together for years, sitting together, building consensus, partnering together, coming up with a plan. The second thing that I learned from that documentary that I think was really critical in getting us to where we are today, and honestly, why 40 years later, 50 years later, you know, we found ourselves in the same place. But 100 white families from Mill Valley led the desegregation of the Sausalito-Marin City School District in the 60s. And, you know, as an old Mill Valley boy, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, when my mom and I moved back to Mill Valley in 1981, it was totally a sleepy little hippie town, kind of like Fairfax and San Anselmo used to be. Our county's changed a lot. Those of you that are younger or newer to our county can't possibly imagine the Mill Valley and the Fairfax of 1981. But what hasn't changed is this you know, this progressivism, this liberalism that our county is known for. And so it didn't surprise me that 100 white families from Mill Valley led that desegregation effort. But it stuck out to me like a sore thumb. Well, of course it didn't work because white families in Sausalito didn't buy in. So that's also what I knew I had to do differently. I knew that this had to be a Sausalito and Marin City effort done together. And not only did this community come together and generate a plan that has been both reviewed and approved and celebrated by the Civil Rights Project at UCLA. For those of you that are academic research nerds like me, I was super honored for Gary Orfield and Patricia Gandara to review the plan that we put together. Another plug for La Profesora Gandara. If you haven't read her work, The Latino Education Crisis, I'd strongly recommend that you read it as sort of required foundational reading for thinking about the education of Latino people or educating in Latino communities. But they reviewed our plan and they gave it a thumbs up. They gave me some feedback, you know, some small minor revisions, but that was a really huge affirmation and validation. But that plan, anybody involved in it, if you read it, that plan came from the community. I did not write that plan. The community wrote that plan. And I think that's really what helped us get to where we are today. I would also be remiss in acknowledging the effect of the global pandemic, of the global pandemics, of the coronavirus pandemic, of the police violence pandemic, of what happened when the Capitol building got stormed. I think it allowed a lot of people in our county who had grown really comfortable voting how they vote, but maybe not doing a whole lot else, to realize that sitting on the fence or not coming out for issues that didn't directly affect them meant that they were not walking their talk politically. And I saw a shift in our community. And I saw people who I never imagined would get behind what we were doing to unify our schools and integrate our school district, all of a sudden come out very strongly and vocally in support of those things. And I wish that George Floyd and all of the other people that have lost their life in these kinds of interactions with law enforcement did not have to lose their lives for us to collectively wake up. But I think I would be a fool not to recognize that also was a critical change lever in this process. And when I first read the settlement agreement with the Attorney General, I thought to myself, hey, there was 5, 10, and 15-year benchmarks. We had to diversify, and it's an odd settlement agreement, y'all. It's based on geography, not on race, just in case anybody was not aware of that. There's nothing about race in the settlement agreement. It doesn't mention it at all. It references geographic enrollment areas. Now, those are absolutely proxies for race in Sausalito and Marin City, but it really doesn't call out race. It talks about geographic enrollment areas. And so we had to diversify our enrollment area by 40% in 5 years, by 50% in 10 years, and by 55% in 15 years. And because this community came together in support of unification, and because of the amazing work of our teachers and our staff and our principals on the school design team, 99% and 11 of 13 district teachers and students stayed for this school year. 14 of 16 teachers from the charter school and 93% of students and families stayed for this unified school. So in 2 years, we met the 5, 10, and 15-year desegregation benchmarks. And that would not have been possible without this incredible community collaboration. And, you know, the first day of school, even before that, the first day that staff returned to work this year was really incredibly emotional. When I walked on this campus, we had one teacher of color. Last year, in my second year, we had 5 out of 13. This year, 14 out of 28 teachers are teachers of color. And, you know, one other thing I'll say about leadership is, you know, often we are the hiring managers for our organizations. And if it's not us, it's people that we directly supervise. And in order to diversify your organization anywhere, but especially in a place like Marin, you have to be very intentional about how you do that. And I'm not suggesting anybody break the law. You know, you can't discriminate based on race or age, and that goes in multiple directions, right? But what I'm talking about is intentional in terms of recruitment, intentional in terms of partnerships, right? We created a teacher of color pipeline here that is now has served as a scaffold for a teacher of color pipeline for the whole county. Shout out to Robin Pendole and Marin Promise Partnership, who's on that call, who really, I wouldn't have been able to do that work without his support. But it's about getting the right candidates to apply and be in the interview pool. And then you don't need to do anything else special other than that, because you got highly qualified candidates of color in your pool, and they will rise to the top. But you need to be intentional about setting that up. And so that was an emotional day for me, and I think for everyone. It was incredible to see just that's the staff together for the first time ever. And we focused for a couple days on courageous conversations about race and on social justice and about really rethinking the social purposes of school. You know, I've got a 2-hour presentation on this, so I'll try to make it 90 seconds. But, you know, the social purpose of school in any colonial society. So this is an American problem, but it's not a problem. Sorry, it's a problem of the United States, but it's not a problem unique to the United States of America. It is a problem that can be found in any colonial country and any colonized country. It doesn't matter whether it's you're speaking French or you're speaking English or you're speaking Spanish, right? Schools around the world in colonized countries were used as tools of cultural and linguistic erasure, to erase indigenous cultures and languages and impose colonial culture and language. And even in places where they don't have the same history of colonialism, schools are used as tools of social reproduction. You know, China, doesn't matter. They're used to culturally and linguistically reproduce a society, a dominant society. And so a big part of what we were talking about in those first 2 days outside of courageous conversations was, how do we do something different? How do we create a school and a school system that isn't designed to do those things, that is designed to develop critical thought, is designed to develop social justice thinking and climate justice thinking, is designed to lift up indigenous wisdom, is designed to create collective versus individual approaches to problem solving, is designed to connect us to nature. and we're still totally in the design process, right? We're not there yet, but we're on the road, we're on the pathway. And of that, I'm very proud of this staff and this community. We were able to, and I've been proud of this organization. We had 176 days of in-person school and no COVID transmissions last year. And we learned a lot from doing that. And our partnership with Dr. Santora and Benita McLaren at Health and Human Services is just amazing. And with the Marin County Office of Education, with Mary Jane Burke and Tarina Morris, what we were able to do in this county, people look at our vaccination rates and they say, well, it's because it's Marin and they're rich. Let me tell you something. Our vaccination rates in this county might be helped because it's Marin and we're rich, but it didn't happen because we're Marin and it's rich and we're rich. Our public health department, relative to other public health departments in other counties, has a relatively small staff. If you look at the staffing ratio between Health and Human Services and the Marin County Department of Public Health versus the Alameda County Department of Public Health or the San Francisco Department of Public Health, the staffing ratios are dramatically different. And so the Department of Public Health partnered with the Marin County Office of Education, and every single public school district in this county mobilized our staff to help with the vaccine rollout. And that's why we have a high rate of vaccination in Marin. And that partnership is ongoing. We would not have been able to operate 176 days of in-person school with zero COVID transmissions without a very tight partnership with Health and Human Services. And I said this to Lisa the other day, Dr. Santora the other day. I said, I don't know how she does it. She's one of the most fabulously responsive people that I've ever worked with. And I told her the last time I talked with her, I was like, I need to take lessons from you. I need to learn how you do it. It's very rare that she doesn't pick up a phone call from me on a second ring. And she's an incredibly busy human being. I mean, at least as busy, if not busier than I am. And that's how we got to where we are. And I think our ability to safely operate in-person school last year also helped begin to build a faith and a trust in us as a school district that frankly had been lost or had been missing for a really long time. People saw that we were able to accomplish something that was very hard to accomplish, and that wasn't being accomplished in some other spaces around our state. And so I was pretty excited to start this school year. And I think probably all of us had a realization in early August. Holy buckets, we're in for another year of COVID operation, not coming out of COVID operation. And maybe how we've been thinking about planning this year needs to be a lot more tightly coupled with what we did last year than whatever it was that we were hoping. And I'm glad that we had those lessons because we had some major challenges to start this school year. You may have seen the article in the newspaper. Now, it turns out that, the headline was a cluster of cases in the Sausalito-Marin City School District. It turns out that cluster of cases was 2 kindergartners and their older siblings. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Santora, but I still don't think that we have a ruling of an in-school transmission. And so this is our 17th day of school. and so 176 plus 17 is 193, no, 83, no, 93 days. So 193 days of in school, in person, 6 hours, 7 hours a day, and 0 in school COVID transmissions. But I think the greatest challenge that we have before us in this regard is, and one more shout out to Dr. Santora. They came down, they screened everybody for us in partnership with us. That's how we found the cases. And then came back Tuesday after Labor Day and retested everybody. And it was actually a really strong confirmation that our protocols are working. We had 0 new cases in our middle school. And they did detect 2 other cases at the elementary level, but they were related to an infamous Labor Day pool party that affected multiple school districts, not just ours. And so, it's a different COVID variant. Delta moves differently, it works differently. And that's probably our greatest challenge to start this school year, is we're trying to do this with 300 more students and 3 times the number of staff, and a new campus. And right now it's working really well. I have a kind of a mantra about the first 15 days of school. They're a microcosm for the entire school year. And so if you have one school day that doesn't go well out of 15, you're liable to have 170 great days of school and 10 rocky ones. And for every rocky day you have in the first 15 days, you can multiply that one day by 10. So if you do that math, once you get to 2 or 3 rocky days in the first 15, you might want to recalibrate. Are you going to have a tough school year? And I'm really proud to say that the first 15 days of school have been really quite smooth. People know where to go. People know what to do. And I'm really, really excited by the work of our staff. Our new principal here on the Phillips Drive campus, Evita Jackson. She's an absolute rock star, and this campus has been working amazingly. And the continuing work of our staff at the Nevada Street campus and David Finan. And we continue to tighten things. We continue to reflect and adjust and improve. I think that's the last thing I'll say on leadership. Is that it should be an iterative cycle. You should never think that you're done with anything ever. We should always set goals. We should always make action plans. We should always measure what we're doing. And then we should always reflect and adjust. And so I'm really excited for those cycles of continuous improvement or cycles of inquiry to really deepen as part of our organizational culture in the areas of school culture and climate, in the areas of COVID operations, and in the area of academic achievement and community engagement. And so I think I will conclude my remarks there with another huge thank you to Marin Latino Leaders for always including me and inviting me into this space. It's a huge honor to be here today, and thank you everyone for inviting me, and thank you everyone who joined on the call today.
Thank you very much for sharing your personal background and experiences during your time as Superintendent, Dr. Itoko. We're very proud and grateful for the high level of commitment and efforts in education, addressing one of the most challenging tasks in our county, which is desegregation in our schools. You have been a true champion in leading change towards justice, equity, and community. We recognize your outstanding work today, and we honor you and celebrate you as a great Marin County Latino leader. Unfortunately, Shan Tippett, who had just joined our luncheon today, had to step out. but he was here to present a special recognition to you, Dr. Itoko, from the Assembly Member Mark Levine's office and State Senator Mike McGuire. We celebrate your return to Marin County, bringing a wealth of knowledge and talent to Sausalito-Marin City School District. And you have demonstrated transformative, courageous leadership in helping bring positive changes to your school district and community. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And now we have a little bit of time to address some questions. I don't see any questions in the chat, but does anyone in the audience have any questions particularly to Dr. Itoko?
Hi, Brenda. I'd love to say something.
Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Garcia. Great to hear from you. I just wanted to point out, I think one of the other items of leadership that you didn't mention but demonstrated is how many thanks and compliments you gave to your colleagues and coworkers and your former teachers. I think that's a great sign, is recognizing the greatness around you.
Thank you.
Diana Lopez has a question or a comment.
Hi, I'm Diana Lopez. I'm the branch manager at Marin City Library. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Garcia. I've been here at the Marin City Library for 8 years, and he has made such an incredible, I don't want to get all emotional because I will, but he has made such an incredible impact in our community, and I've never seen anything like it. And he is so generous in heart and spirit, and he is just, we are so blessed to have him here in our school district, and my team and I are so grateful to him, and we just love collaborating with him, and he's just an amazing human being, an amazing leader. Thank you, Dr. Garcia.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Let's see.
I'll say a comment. I just want to say thank you for being here. I know that you're a very busy person and you have a lot on your plate. And the fact that you took the time to be here it means a lot, to all of us. And yeah, I just wanted to say that personally, I'm a huge fan and follow your work. And, I just get excited whenever I hear your name in my school district, which is Larkspur Corte Madera. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I could jump in for a minute. So making me feel old as my former student at Itoco, but just want to thank you for being such a risk taker. And as you mentioned, being willing to do what it takes, including getting fired if that's what it is, to do the right thing and make the kind of change happen that is incredibly difficult in our educational system, because it is very, very heavily tilted towards the status quo and not open to changing very much. So just want to honor you for having the courage to do what it takes to shake the tree and make things happen. And so proud of all you've been able to do in a very, very short amount of time. Great job.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. We also have Lisa Maslow with a question or a comment.
Hi, Dr. Garcia. Thank you so much for your inspiring talk today and everything you've done for our community. I have a question about whether you have any ideas about how to extend the progress that you've made in the Marin City School District to those children as they move on to TAM High School. and other high schools in the district. I have had 3 children go to TAM High School, and I was discouraged by how stratified the school was. It was really, I think, kind of different educational opportunities, very much tied to color and background. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And to Jim's point, that was part of my experience as a student there, and I graduated way back in 1992. So, I think part of it is looking at the systems and structures that, that really underpin that resistance to change. And starting to work there, I started to kind of include that in my talk and then shied away because I'd still be talking if I had. But I think, there's some really important, just on the idea of leading for change, there's some really important ideas, right? That, they're important for leadership, but they're particularly germane to change management. And there's a few things that I think that we really know about change. And we know them from academic research. And I think I know them at this point from my practitioner experience. And, as Jim alluded to, systems, particularly educational systems, don't just change. They're incredibly resistant to change. And so, one of the things that I've been saying as I've been writing and speaking recently is this is the golden hour in education for change. We've never had a stress to our system like COVID-19. We've never had a stress to our system like, the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And so organizations usually go through very short periods of change and then freeze. And so it's really important to create small teams of people inside of any organization that are working together, that are piloting those changes, showing proof of concept, and letting other people know in the organization who are resistant or not ready to change. And I'll talk about that in a minute. That this new, different way of doing things is going to be successful and can work. So the second thing I think that's really important in change, whether it's at T-High or other high schools in the county or other school systems, is the idea that we think about change really wrong in our country. We think about change as an action in the United States of America, but change is not an action. Change is a process, right? So we think about change like flicking a light switch. Oh, it went from light to dark, or it went from dark to light, and that's the change. But that's not the change. The change is how people respond to the difference in context. The change is how people respond to being in the light or being in the dark, as the case might be, right? And that response to change, that process, is an emotional process. And it's a process that's very connected to our identities, both our cultural and linguistic identities and our work identities. We are all working in such a capitalist system that our work identities are inextricably linked to our personal identities, right? Most of us, when we introduce ourselves, we'll say our name, and a little bit about maybe where we're from, maybe, and then we always include what we do for a living, right? So any change to a school or a school district is hugely difficult for the people inside of that, because it's a change to their actual personal identity or their work identity. And so it's important to think about change in that regard and understand that when people experience dramatic shifts in identity, there's basically a grieving or a mourning process that happens, right? And the first thing that we do is sit around and freeze for 5 or 6 months and just mourn the loss of our identity. And I think that's a lot of what you saw when COVID hit, right? People looked and said, oh, I can't do my job in the way that I could do it before. I'm not going to think about how I could do it differently or how I could do it better. I just need to sit and process the loss of the way that I was doing it. And then there is a period that William Bridges, who's one of my favorite change theorists, lays out that he calls the neutral zone. And he says it's a pendulum swing between that mourning, that identity loss, and the hope and optimism that a new work identity provides. And it usually takes another 6 months or a year of being in that neutral zone and swinging back and forth before people get to this new work identity and the hope and optimism that new ways of being and doing really provide us. And so I think it's critically important to think about change as a process and not as an action. And I think it's critically important that we plan for that at least 18-month process when we think about change. And I think that there's a lot, we're increasing our collaboration with TAM High. I work very closely with Taratopia and JC Farr. I think they're doing some pretty incredible work. And, I think, part of the big difference that I see right now is, when Jim was a teacher at TAM High, when I was a student at TAM High, TAM was 30% Black. There was a community there that there was a community of elders, there was a community of people that served as a buffer, served as a shield, and yet there were still really differentiated outcomes. Because of the way that private schools in Marin are working and giving scholarships to support diversity, that's no longer true. And I think one important thing is to really cultivate and affirm and validate and welcome the Black community to TAM High in a way that historically really probably hasn't happened. And I know JC's trying. I believe he's trying. I know Tara's trying. But I think some of that work has to come from folks like you, Lisa, and from community members and that are really committed to that difference. And I know Emily Uhlhorn and a few other people from TAM High, I think, are really committed to that work. And I'm looking forward to the collaboration between district organizations and TAM High organizations this year, now that we can get back to some actual in-person collaborating.
Thank you. We have one more comment from Ruby Aguirre.
Hola, buenos días a todos. My name is Ruby Aguirre. Yo soy la nueva directora de Servicios Sociales con Next Generation Scholars. I am new to the community and I'm really grateful to be a part of helping first generation low-income youth in Marin community access equitable education. So I just wanted to thank you, Dr. G. Gomez, I think, I apologize, and everybody who attended today. Thank you so much for all of the knowledge and all of the empowerment today. That's all I wanted to say.
Bienvenidos.
Thank you. And that will conclude our questions and comments. And we're going to be closing with some community announcements. We are having again, or the Multicultural Center is having again, the celebration of Dia de los Muertos in person this year at the Alboro Community Center, known as the Picoweed Center, on Saturday, November 6th from 3 to 9. So hopefully we can see a lot of you there, and we're taking applications for the altars. So we'll be sharing more information on that. Any other final comments or announcements does anyone would like to make?
Good afternoon, everybody. Muy buenas tardes. Thank you so much, Itoco. That was very inspiring. So I really appreciate your leadership and your knowledge. And my husband is from India, and he was also going through middle school at Emil Valley and high school. So I have here some stories as well. So really appreciate your insight and the fact that you're a leader now, you know, in the district. I think is so important. So I just wanted to mention that we have on Saturday, there is a International Coastal Cleanup Day, and the city of San Rafael is hosting different cleanups, and we have one in the canal starting at 10 o'clock. And then after that, at 12 o'clock, we are going to have some listening sessions for the community. So I will be there. Supervisor Dennis Rodoni is going to stop by as well. So I have a flyer that maybe I can send to Latino leaders, and maybe you could share. So thank you so much, Latino leaders, for putting it all together. It's amazing. So thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Micah, and feel free to share any flyers or any information to our email. Hugo just shared it on the chat, and so no one else has any more comments or questions that you again want to thank you, Itoko, for just learning about you, and also a neighbor of mine since I'm from Venezuela and Colombia. So thank you so much for sharing that, and for everyone for coming today and asking questions. I think that the story here can touch some of us. I know it touched me because I also went to Tam High, and I was one of the few Latinas on campus as well. And so a lot of your story, Itoko, really connected to a little of my story going to Tam High. So thank you everyone. Thank you Monica, Brenda, Yolanda, and Hugo for definitely helping this out, and for Brenda to coming and joining our board. This will be our last luncheon for Hugo and myself as part of the board. So we are going to, I'm glad this is for our last one, but again, we are going to be around. So thank you. This concludes our Marin Latino luncheon, and thank you everyone again for coming. And for our next one, Brenda, Monica, and Yolanda will definitely let you know when and what it's going to be about. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. All right, Yolanda, Hugo, Brenda, and Monica, I have to get going. I think Monica also left, so I can go. Oh, she's coming back. I have another meeting that I actually have to attend, so Hugo and Monica are co-host.
Is Monica still here?
Yeah, Monica's here. Let me
Okay.
stop recording.
I left and came back.